This is the I Am A Mainframer podcast, brought to you by the Linux Foundation's Open Mainframe project. Episodes explore the careers of mainframe professionals and offer insights into the industry and technology. Now, your host, Senior Analyst and Vice President of Sales and Business Development at Futurum Research, Steven Dickens.
Hello and welcome. My name's Steven Dickens, and I'm looking forward to today's conversation because I've got a dear friend and former colleague on the show, Eddy Ciliendo from Model9. Hey, Eddy, welcome to the show.
Hey, Steven. Good to be here.
So, our listeners may not know, we worked together pretty hand in glove for 3 years when we were both at IBM. So I think I've probably known you probably a little bit longer than I was thinking this morning, maybe 5 years or so. So,
Yeah.
As I say, I know you, but just to get our listeners and viewers orientated, just give a brief introduction and tell people a little bit about what you do today for Model9.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the Global Vice President for our strategy and technology. So I do everything in Model9 from, defining and which markets we should go in, who we should partner with, kind of our strategic alliances, but then also, where do we want to go long-term with our product, with our technology evolution, so that kind of stuff. So
and you didn't mention you're the sort of public-facing face of Model9 and carrying on your tradition of being the best-looking man in the mainframe space.
Well, you said that, but yeah, I mean, I've always it's funny, right? Because I always consider myself to be more of a shy guy, but I'm very passionate about the mainframe platform. I'm very passionate about what we do. So that's why I like to speak up. That's why I like to be talking to young people, be talking to analysts, and just bring the message out there.
Well, there's a backstory that we may or may not share at some point if you bump into us in a bar about that inside joke. But I'll let Eddy off that one for the purposes of this podcast.
I appreciate that, Steve.
So tell some of the listeners about Model9. What do you guys do? Conscious you're a relatively new name in the mainframe space. So let's go there first, and then we'll come back to you and kind of your history through the platform.
Yeah, which is kind of, it's funny if you say we're relatively new in the mainframe space, right? Because I mean that is, and we probably will get into it later on during this conversation here. I mean, I think everything that isn't like 2 decades old is relatively new in the mainframe space. But you're right. I mean, we're a startup company. We were founded 6 years ago in 2016. And I mean, I could give you the marketing answer, but let me rather give you the technical answer because I think we're going to have more of a technical audience here. I mean, I think our unique value proposition is that we connect mainframes, IBM mainframes running ZOS with the whole cloud/object storage world, right? And I think a lot of mainframers don't know a whole lot about object storage, so it's more probably the cloud people that know about object storage. But object storage, and honestly, I was the same, right? Until Gil Pellick, our founder and CEO, approached me, I didn't really have a understanding of object storage. But object storage, I mean, that's currently the big thing out there. It's very quickly evolving into the standard storage architecture for all cloud/containerized applications. So it really is a big thing. There's a ton of innovation going on in the object storage space. And until Model9 introduced the concept to the IBM mainframe world, the mainframe really was kind of disconnected from all that cool stuff, from all of that innovation. So that's a claim to fame for Model9. And by using object storage, we then enable a couple of really cool use cases, like using object storage for long-term retention, for backup restore, for third copies and cyber resiliency, using it as a platform for AI and machine learning. So there's a lot of cool use cases, but the underlying technology really is just bringing object storage and attach it to a ZOS system.
So it's changing the paradigm. I mean, we've all heard of DASD, direct attached storage device, the sort of classic paradigm for probably since that mainframe was launched, that's over your left shoulder there in your office back in the 60s, has been to attach the storage directly to the box itself. And that's evolved over the years. Obviously EMC, Hitachi, and IBM have kind of evolved what that means. But fundamentally, the model's been direct attached storage to the box. You guys come along and change that paradigm. Is that a sort of simple way of thinking about it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of funny that you say that, right? And we're probably going to talk about this in a couple of minutes. But when I joined the mainframe team at IBM over 2 decades ago, I had a book on my table. We still had desks, and I wanted to look smart, so I had a couple of really big books on my table, and one of them was about TCP/IP. And I remember one of the old mainframe guys coming to me and say, "Oh, look, boy, you don't have to learn anything about TCP/IP because SNA is the thing. Nobody ever would want to have a protocol that is not controlled by the mainframe." And it's the same thing right now, like over 2 decades later, that the storage paradigm in the mainframe world is still all direct attached, right? FICON attached tape, FICON attached virtual tape, FICON attached DASD. And I think there's still a bit of a reluctance in people to say, hey, no, I can actually attach storage via TCP/IP, right? I mean, the network has gotten so darn fast. The OSA cards in the mainframes are now so capable. And again, all the development that happened in object storage and cloud object storage now is so evolved that you really get great performance levels out of it. So yes, it is a paradigm shift, and it just reminds me, kind of about the paradigm shift between SNA and then later TCP/IP. So.
Well, that gives me a perfect segue. You're the perfect host, Eddie, the perfect guest as always. Let's go all the way back. Let's talk. The show's called I'm a Mainframer. Let's get a little bit of your journey on the platform. You mentioned there, I think where you've ended up from sort of the roles that we've worked together in and kind of where you've started, that's a great sort of career trajectory. So maybe let's just wind all the way back. You finished college kind of in Europe. Where does that kind of take you from there on in?
Yeah, and it actually, kind of, I think my passion for the mainframe started way before college.
Mm-hmm.
It started with movies like WarGames, if you remember that one.
I do. Yeah. I love that.
Exactly. And for me, it's funny for me, in that movie. So for all the younger kids listening to this show here, you probably have to look that movie up. But, for me, it was less about a story. For me, it was really about the computer. I was just, fascinated by this big computer.
Whopper was it? That was it. Whopper, wasn't it?
Exactly. I was just fascinated by that. And then later on, I got introduced. I think it wasn't a ZOS mainframe. I think it was an AS400 system at the time. But still, I was introduced to that system because my mother worked in a company, had one of those boxes, and the IT guys, they just loved having me around, and I was just intrigued by a system, where you would have to interact with the system by a very strange command line interface, and there wasn't anything graphical. You couldn't use a mouse or anything, and I was just fascinated by that. And then later on, after finishing college, I thought, okay, so where should I go? And I sent my resume to Microsoft and sent my resume to IBM, and I really decided to go for IBM because they had this obscure system that nobody really knew anything about, and it was really this fascination that got me started in the mainframe world.
So tell us a little bit about that first job. You come out of college, you've sent your resume around. Kind of what was that first sort of career step on the platform?
Yeah, I kind of lucked out, right? Because I think and you may remember this, right? I think back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I had this first wave of trying to rejuvenate the mainframe, right? So they brought Java to the platform, WebSphere to the platform, a lot of new stuff, Unix system services, right? So kind of the Unix compatibility, which is a big thing. I mean, Linux was still very much in its infancy back in the late 90s, but that was kind of the time where I came in, and I really lucked out because I was able to get on board as a performance specialist. I was able to replace a gentleman who was on the platform since its original days back in the early 60s, and take over from him, being introduced and learning just, and that's what I still love about this platform. I was able to learn so much, and that's how I got started. I started as a system engineer, a performance specialist. I did all the good RMF and SMF stuff. And that's how I got started in the platform.
So maybe wind us forward. So you're coming on, you're sort of hands on with the platform in a performance role. Kind of what's next? What was kind of some of those steps that get you maybe join the dots from there to when we started working together, and you'd kind of more moved into a sort of business and management type space?
Yeah. So again, I was a system engineer. Expert for many years, then evolved into more of an architect, systems architect, designing larger systems. Had some sort of a CTO functionality. IBM called it at that time called it CTA, but it really was a CTO functionality for large accounts. And I covered the financial services sector, so covered a large account in the financial services sector. And then I got asked by a former client of mine whether I would like to take it. Their head of mainframe retired. Again, I think I wasn't really good at what I did. I think it was just at the right place at the right time, right? So again, another retirement. That customer calls me up and asks me whether I would want to become the head of mainframe, take over the mainframe department. And after, as an IBMer, talking for years about how customers should implement their systems, best practices, and all those nice PowerPoint charts, I just really was intrigued about the chance of, okay, now I can prove it. Now we can really do all this stuff that we were talking about. And took that position, and that was very, very eye-opening, just to see, how such a large environment works in practice, all kind of responsibility that is on you as a head of mainframe, as a mainframer in general, because, if those systems, as if those systems go down, it's not like you just reboot the server underneath your desk. A company really is in bad trouble. So I kind of started to understand that better, and then also work with a lot of young kids during that time. One of the things that I did at Swiss Re, which was the company that hired me as a head of mainframe, was onboard young talent, get kids from college or through an apprenticeship into the mainframe department, which was also, very, very eye-opening, just to see how those young kids adapt to that decades-old technology. So that's what I did for a couple of years. And then I got a phone call after, I think, 4 years at Swiss Re. I got a phone call from an old friend at IBM. And they said that they were looking for somebody to lead the mainframe business in Asia Pacific. And I always had a love for Asia. My wife and I, we always wanted to go to Singapore. And sure enough, the job was in Singapore. Took the opportunity, relocated the whole family to Singapore, lived there for a couple of years, made a lot of great friends in Asia. It was really, again, mind-opening, just the speed, the business culture in the Pacific. And after that, I was asked by a dear friend of both of us, Jose Castano, whether I would like to join the worldwide team, the worldwide IBM hardware sales team. And that's where the two of us really work closely together, right?
Well, I think that's fascinating. And I've had the pleasure of hosting the show now for a number of years, and it's really interesting. You've been in one technology space your entire career, but you've been able to travel the world. You start in Switzerland, you spend time in Singapore, you end up ultimately in working for a startup in Raleigh. But the one constant has been that mainframe. You've done technical roles, you've done client roles where you've actually ran the platform for a big organization. You've done leadership roles. Kind of, is that something, has that mainframe been that constant throughout? It sounds like it has, but I mean, I suppose the point I'm trying to illustrate is you can build a diverse career across multiple countries on this platform, and that's my shared experience.
No, absolutely. And I think, I listened to your show previously, and I think some of the other people that you had on the show had exactly the same experience, right? So yeah, the technology was really that constant. And it's also nice because, in a lot of technology areas, you have to, completely forget every couple of years you have to completely forget what you've learned before, right? I mean, take the Linux Foundation and the Linux kernel just as one example, right? I mean, Linux reinvents itself every couple of years, right? There's a brand new kernel and everything is different. And the nice thing from a technology point of view, right? I mean, the ISPF that I worked on, the mainframe interface that I worked on 20 years ago, still looks very, very familiar to this day. Yet, as you stated correctly, right? I mean, I've done everything from very hands-on system engineering, working on the customer's data center, to being a manager, being in sales, being an architect, and now working at a startup.
And it's really interesting. We've got a lot of younger listeners to the show, and I think that's the key part and why we're so keen to get you on the show. You've got such a diverse career across, 3 big continents on this platform. What's been some of the learnings? What's been some of the sort of key takeaways? You're very humble and say that it's always good to work for somebody who's close to retirement age, but I don't think it's just pure luck, Eddie. What are some of those key takeaways that you've seen?
Well, I think in general, and the mainframe world is ideal for that, right? Just listen to other people, be open to learn, right? I remember, I joined during the .com bubble, and I think in general we in IT, have the problem that we always think the new stuff is the best thing there has been since sliced bread, right? And there's a lot of people that go out there, and I was the same, right? Back in the 90s, I thought I'm the smartest kid on the block, and whatever we do is new and great. And as I started in mainframe world, it was really humbling experience. I was working with people who were doing IT in some shape or form for 40 years. Right? And even though it looked different 40 years ago, you had real punch cards to do your batch processing and stuff like that. I mean, the architectural principles, a lot of the IT principles that our modern cloud world is based upon, go back for 40, 50, 60 years, right? So just be open, have an open mind, and be open to listen, because I think that is a unique thing in the mainframe world. We have so many people with, such great experience. When I was working at IBM in my last job, where the two of us met, we had the pleasure of working with so many great people out of Poughkeepsie that have been with the platform for decades. And there's just so much of a learning experience. My suggestion to people join the mainframe world, younger kids, is really have this open mind and be open to listen and to learn, because there's so much to learn in this space.
And I think that's been consistent as I've been the host of the show and had the pleasure of interviewing so many sort of luminaries in the mainframe space. Everybody is really keen to bring new talent onto the platform. There's pathways to do that through skills, through learning. But I think it also comes down to people like you and people like me, and just people like us across the whole community, who are just really keen to act as mentors, act as kind of mounting guides as people look to build a career in this platform. It's been my key takeaway that the community as a whole is invested in bringing new talent through. Is that what you see?
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember, kind of during the early days of my career, I also worked in other platforms, right? The Linux space, the Unix space, and the Wintel space. And, oftentimes I got perhaps it was just kind of my gut feel to it, but I got the impression that, people that were closer in age-wise, it was in my early 20s, people that were in their early 30s, would be more reluctant to share their knowledge and just be, open kimono and say, look, this is how you do it. Whereas in the mainframe world, everybody from day one, was just, okay, I got to tell you everything. I got to tell you every little secret, every little tweak, every little hint, which makes it just so much easier for somebody to start.
Well, I think there's a reason why the big sort of user conference in the US is called Share.
Yeah.
Because people genuinely want to share their knowledge, expertise, and share the cheat codes. And I don't get that same impression that that's how other communities, it's kind of a bit more competitive in
Yeah.
the skill space. So it's interesting. I mean, that kind of leads me on to one question. One of the questions I always ask our guests on the show is, you get the opportunity to go back. We've invented a time machine, and we give you the opportunity to go back and talk to 22-year-old Eddy, who's just starting out on his career, looks even more good looking than sort of middle-aged Eddy does today. But what advice would you give? What would be your sort of, what's your experience, and how would you condense that and talk back to sort of impart that to your younger self?
Yeah, so I think there's two things, right? So first, there's going to be the dad advice, right, which is probably broader than technology, and the dad advice is just read more. And it sounds stupid, but there's really just out of books, out of reading, out of experience of other people, you can get so much knowledge and wisdom around anything, whether it's how to lead your life, how to be better at sports, everything, right? So just read more. Everything has already been written down by somebody smarter than you. So read more. That's kind of my dad advice. And then the mainframe dad advice, I guess, would just be stick with it. Right. There were many times during my career where I thought, there was the next hot thing coming up, and I thought, well, I really have to get into this Unix thing. I really now, I should really just fully embrace Linux and ditch that whole ZOS stuff and do something completely different. And I think the best thing, and it's probably just pure dumb luck, the best thing was sticking with the platform, sticking with the mainframe environment, and just growing in that ecosystem.
I think that's interesting. I mean, you're a case in point of somebody who's built a career across more. You've kind of been able to change the location where you do your job, change what the job is, change how technical the job is, whether it's strategy, sales, technical, hands-on, whether it's been vendor side or customer side, but you've kept consistent on that mainframe platform and kept consistent on the technology.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think that the last piece of advice which is again probably back more of a dad advice, is just do what you love, right? I mean, I think that the one consistent thing is I always had this passion, this wonder, this love for the mainframe platform, and I stick with it, right? And I always say I'm a really bad salesman. I remember I've been in so many sales calls where I had to sell something that I didn't believe in, and I start blushing, I start stuttering. So I'm really bad salesman, but I believe in what I do, and I love to share that. So once you have something that you love, then stick with it.
So as we start to wrap up here, I asked this of all the guests on the show, and I think you've got a pretty unique perspective. Where do you see the platform sort of 3-5 years out? We both know IBM's working on Z17, so there's no point sort of talking kind of what that next box is going to look like. I'm thinking sort of more across the industry, more across the landscape. Where do you think we'll be 3, 5, maybe sometime even beyond that?
Yeah. So, I mean, on a high level perspective, I think the mainframe will be alive and kicking.
Mm-hmm.
Even though there's naysayers out there, there've always been naysayers out there, but I think the mainframe will be alive and kicking. I think just from an architectural point of view, there's just certain workloads that benefit from a extremely consolidated architecture with high levels of security, low latency, right? And I think there's just nothing that will replace that for certain workloads. For other workloads, yes, there are other architectures that are better. So I mean, from an architectural point of view, I think that will continue. Large banks will continue to run very large mainframe installations, airlines, insurance companies, governments. So I think just generally, I think the platform has a very bright future. But I think even more so, and I guess that's also kind of a hint to our friends over at IBM, I think the future will be even brighter if IBM continues that journey of opening up the mainframe, right? I mean, we're here on the Open Mainframe podcast, right? So I think it makes a lot of sense. But, if we go back to kind of how we started the podcast and you asked about Model 9, I mean, we do, there's so much innovation out there, right? And innovation, whether it's technology innovation or innovation just in young people that have bright ideas, great ideas, You have to open up the ecosystem. You have to get those bright ideas in, and then the mainframe ecosystem is just a great place for those great ideas. Again, whether it's people or just technology, to grow and make the platform even better than what it is today.
I think, I feel that way about the platform as well. I think particularly what the Open Mainframe project are doing, what you're doing to sort of transform some of those paradigms that have been there since the very early days of the platform. I think that's how the platform evolves and survives. So I couldn't think of a better way to start to wrap up here, Eddy. So it's been great chatting to you as always.
Likewise.
And look forward to catching up sometime soon. So thanks very much for being on the show.
Thank you, Steven. It was a pleasure. Take care.
We'll speak to you next time. You've been listening to the I'm a Mainframer podcast. Please click and subscribe, and we'll catch you on the other side. Thanks very much.
Thank you for tuning in to I Am A Mainframer. Liked what you heard? Subscribe to get every episode, or watch us online at openmainframeproject.org. Until next time, this is the I Am A Mainframer podcast. Insights for today's mainframe professionals.